this conversation will be our moderator, Dr. Sage Wexner, and then our speakers today are Amira Abdullah Albusadi, who's CEO and founder of MulhimVR. She has 14 years of work working passionately towards making a good impact. Her recent achievements include founding an innovation-based startup, introducing VR into healthcare, and working closely with healthcare specialists and hospitals. The SAS Center for Virtual Reality was one of the biggest projects that she's worked on since its establishment. Working in the developing VR industry in Oman, empowering youth, and building partnerships locally and internationally have been very interesting and sometimes challenging for her. Her master's and bachelor's in computer science in SQU, full of challenges, joys, and lessons, but they were her best achievements. She believes that challenges are always there, but it becomes very interesting to solve when you have the passion and try to get the lessons to learn. Our next panelist is Franziska-Juliette Klebôn, who's head of data and AI at Microsoft in Switzerland. Franziska is an experienced strategy, technology, and business advisor passionate about digital technology trends such as artificial intelligence, analytics, and cloud computing, digital assets, and blockchain. It helps businesses reduce risk and improve their value proposition through innovative ways of thinking and approaching their challenges. As head of data and AI, tech for sustainability lead, and responsible AI advocate at Microsoft Switzerland, she guides clients across industries through their digital journey to become data-driven organizations while empowering them to achieve 2030 SDGs with technology. In her private life, she is building more energy-efficient houses and loves crafting lamps made of wood and stone. Last but not least, our moderator today is Dr. Sage Wexner, Director of Medical Simulations and Assistant Professor in Emergency Medicine at Kern Medical. He's a board-certified doctor, medical simulations at an urban community trauma center. He oversees the use of simulation to instruct emergency medicine, internal medicine, OBGYN, psychiatry, nursing, and pharmacy residents and students. He carries more than 21 years of experience in emergency medicine and nursing, and will be asking the hard questions here at the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I will send it over to our panelists to share their insights. Here's yours.
Excellent. How is my volume, folks?
I can hear you. Can those in the back here?
That's good.
Real good. Then let's start off with the positives. Dr. Albusadi, do you want to start by talking about the positives of virtual reality for healthcare and for my patients? All right. How about Dr. Klebôn?
Sure, can start. Happy to do so. So for me, the positives, and to be honest, we have more healthcare specialists here on stage than I am. I'm really looking into the ethical perspective or responsible AI lenses when I talk about metaverse. But for me, if I just see the future and think about healthcare, for me, having a virtual digital doctor practice, could really help speed up the process, but it also requires having all data available. So sharing a common data platform, and this is what we are here in Switzerland particularly working on with first healthcare ecosystems that are building up, that are looking into possibilities of those. That also might then lead to a blockchain framework as a foundation. But yeah, there's positive. We just need to explore.
Great. So speed, I think that's something that everybody who's ever waited in an emergency room could appreciate. Dr. Farid, can you talk about the positives?
Rafi, I think you need to unmute yourself.
Dr. Amira, if you could unmute yourself.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry, could you repeat?
What are the positive aspects for our patients about virtual reality?
Yes. So we have worked with patients. Actually, we have worked a lot with kids, and we have did multiple pilot studies using VR in dental, pediatric, and for cancer patients. And we have found that patients are they like to use VR during treatment and also before or after. And based on the feedback that we are collecting, that they are preferring to use VR during treatment than the traditional way where they are using different distraction tools. So this is what we have found with the patients, especially when we speak about, for example, kids. Also, their parents, they are preferring using such distraction tools for during the treatment. Actually, we have also measured the anxiety, and we have found it helped in reducing the anxiety for patients.
And that's been my understanding of the literature as well. So another positive is this is a technology that we could use to ameliorate pain or anxiety, to distract children or patients undergoing a painful or nervous procedure
Yes.
without having to restrain them or give them, medications to which they might have an adverse react. So we have speed, we have some anti-pain medicines and things like that. What negative effects have you witnessed, Dr. Albusadi, since you're still on the unmuted?
No, I am not muted. Yes. So the negatives that we have found, actually, one thing is for the healthcare team. Sometimes the resistance of using new technologies, it is something that it is not, even if the patients, they are willing to use the technologies, sometimes the resistance from, for example, nurses, it is one challenge because we need to work with the whole ecosystem, the patients, the doctors, the nurses. So if one of them is not accepting using technology, it will not help. Another thing, sometimes the size of the headsets in specific cases, like for example dental, because the doctors are working on the tooth of the patient, so they need to change the way how they are dealing with the face, because there is an object now on the face. So sometimes it is also like you need to make a change, which also makes resistance. For the VR experiences, also you have some constraints because it is not like entertainment cases where players are enjoying VR and they are standing and playing. Sometimes they need only to use it on their bed or while they are laying down, so they don't have the full control of the VR. And also the kind of content that you should build, it needs to be suitable and for the case for someone who is laying down. So not all the content will be suitable for their case. So these are some challenges. I cannot say these are like negative things, but these are challenges that we need to deal with. And we need to consider that VR will be working for a category of people, but other people, maybe VR will not be the best option for them. It's like any kind of therapy.
So it sounds like staff has been somewhat resistant, a little bit difficult rolling out to people who may not be as versed in the virtual reality platform, and then also the hardware constraints, either cords, lying down positioning, and or a bulky headset getting in the way of your operation.
Yeah.
Dr. Klebôn, what negatives have you seen?
Just to echo on what you guys have just already mentioned, I mean, we have, of course, some fear that advanced technologies such as the metaverse may really only appeal to the young and tech savvy. So if you're looking at the elderly that have chronic diseases and really can profit of those, they might miss out on the opportunity it brings. Besides that, what you all mentioned already, it also is costly, right? To buy such a HoloLens or whatsoever, for instance, is really a cost factor. But in addition, also due to massive infrastructure and costs required to build such a metaverse in healthcare, not all healthcare providers, hospital insurances, whatsoever, might be able to set this up. Besides this, from a micro perspective, we see an issue around data security. As with most digital platforms that allow data sharing or harvesting of large data sets, security compromises may be an important issue. And the industry has to develop strong security mechanisms to ensure patient data remains safe and only accessible to authorized personnel within the metaverse. We have seen that in the future, we might think about voice to identify identities. So then think about the disabled people that maybe have no voice at all, right? So we need to think about all of those things, and something, of course, is regulatory concerns. We have data laws coming up, such as the health insurance portability and accountability rules that may hinder the operation of the metaverse in the healthcare system in some particular situations. And from a EU or European Commission perspective, because I'm now here based in Switzerland, European Commission still applies to us, right? It's like we are looking into risks when it comes to AI development. So you're looking into what are high risk, medium risk, low risk. So all of those things are right now recommendations, and we need to look a little bit deeper and solve these issues together going forward. Yeah.
Sounds like the negatives you're concerned about are advanced tech, especially with the elderly, the cost, concerns for data security, identity theft, or inability to employ this technology by disabled people, for instance, people who are mute or deaf, and then regulatory issues, and then the kind of the four issues of AI development. Maybe the machines will take over.
Not sure if they take over yet, but it's more about who can access, how can they access, and how can we make sure data privacy is owned by the people. So that's why we need to watch out.
Those are all great points. In the literature, there's also descriptions of vertigo and people being nauseated while they're doing virtual reality. And so that's one of the negative things that I've seen. Are there questions from the audience right now about the proposed positives and negatives as we've addressed so far? Excellent. Then turning back to you, Dr. Klebôn, have you seen any actual harms on your patients or my patients through the use of VR?
Not yet, to be honest. We are playing around and we are exploring, and it's more about the concerns we are having. I mean, you might know Switzerland is a very conservative country. So in order to making that steps, we all need to have let's say a public version of a metaverse where we can collaborate, work together. And that requires a common data model, a common data platform. And we have not established that yet, right? So it's more about finding ways on dealing with the regulations and requirements that we have in place right now and opening it up and going and trying it out.
Great. In terms of actual harms, I have seen people accidentally walk into walls, and I have seen people have to take off their headsets because they're so nauseated. Those are the harms that I've seen. Dr. Albusadi, have you seen actual harms?
Actual harms on patients using the VR, you mean? Actually, we have put some exclusion criteria for the people who they are not, because we are working with cancer patients. So we have from the beginning excluded, like for example, brain tumor, but we didn't see serious side effects. Dizziness, it is a side effect that is coming not only for patients, it is even for other people, and it is not related to, I think the reason one will be is the way how you design the content, the speed of movement and other things. And we are working on these elements when we design the VR experiences. But sometimes you are using the same content for two people, and the reaction is different between both. So it is difficult to measure, but it is not serious. And we are directing people to just remove the headset once they feel dizziness. People now also after COVID, they are afraid of infection after using the same headset between people, but also we are advising people to use the like covers and specific way how they can clean the headsets. So this is kind of the safety of using headsets, and especially in the healthcare environment in the hospitals.
So in terms of the risks either that you've seen or that you anticipate or that you're concerned about, what steps could I as a doctor take to protect my patients, or what steps could your dentist take to take care or protect their patients?
The first thing, we are introducing the technology for the patient. So the doctor should tell the patient that they will be putting the VR headset and what they are expecting to see. And if there is an option to choose the content, it will be good, because maybe they have specific aspects, some or concerns with specific kind of content. This is the first thing. Second thing, that when the doctor puts the headset, they should make sure that it is fixed on the head. It will not maybe with his movement will be thrown down and will maybe harm the patient. The third thing, that the doctor should wait a little until the patient goes inside the experience, then starting to do the treatment. For example, if they are targeting reducing anxiety, for example. And then if the patient feels uncomfortable, they should remove the headset, or tell the doctor or the nurse just to remove the headset directly. They don't need to stay for the whole experience. It's based on their comfort. And at the end, you should clean it and make sure that you take all the infection control side of using the headsets inside the hospital.
Those sound very practical and very applicable to the bedside. Dr.
I might have
Klebôn.
a question to our colleague on the stage. Do you use already the technology of Metaverse in general for digital twins of patients? So let's say to use virtualize or run models in the Metaverse that can enable practitioners to test intervention options, predict recovery trajectory, or identity possible reactions to any medication. So do you use it in this kind of way? Because right now we're talking about the VR glasses mainly, but more like from a practical perspective. I think that's in the future happening.
Or asking me, Amira?
Yes, so do you use already the Metaverse
Yes.
for digital twins of patients?
Yes. We are using virtual experiences for patients, and these virtual experiences that we are designing in collaboration with the healthcare specialists and psychologists. So we do like pilot studies with different kind of patients. We are like we took time to experience what are the best use cases for VR, and we have found that in some cases it is not the best choice is to use VR. For example, in pediatric clinic, for example, for clinics that are taking a huge number of patients, it is not the best option. But for example, wards where you have patients who are spending a long time, maybe this is a good option to use VR. I don't know if I have answered your question or not.
I think there was already a very, very good answer. It's just the way I think about Metaverse right now is for our customers, it's often kind of an extension of the current world, right? So we are thinking about, for instance, how we can leverage digital twins in the Metaverse to improve existing manufacturing processes, right? By running advanced simulations on real-world data, for instance, provided by IoT sensors. And then once the AI has enough historical and real-time data collected, it can really simulate the entire process and then identify areas that can be improved. And I'm wondering how you apply that or how you think about this in the future, because I think that also has an implication on how we develop medicine or even devices in the healthcare industry.
So if I can weigh in. I think Dr. Albusadi is using it clinically for amelioration of pain or anxiety in her patients, and is kind of trying to work on the aspects of that. And a lot of her concerns are regarding the consent process and making sure that the patients and their families are aware and have a way of stopping the process should it be unpleasant. It sounds like you're kind of interested in research. My interest is education, and where I see this having a role in education, especially with the eye tracking, the pupillary dilatation, and things like that you're talking about. If I put a headset on my learner, I give them a novel situation, I can watch how they're kind of processing the information I'm giving them in the metaverse, and in that way it would kind of replicate or simulate a kind of a medical experience like you're talking about.
Immersive training is a called, yes. Yeah, very good.
I think one of the concerns I would have would be advertisers using the same kind of education or the pupillary dilatation, things like that, as a way of targeting specific population. I'm gonna try and move away from her mic. But that's along the lines of the kind of the data, I think, breaches that you're concerned about. So if an education software isn't secure and does release all of, for instance, all the doctors in a certain medical class, all their pupillary exam findings, what they look like when they're interested, when they're learning, I could see that being applied to nefarious or for solicitation purposes.
I think if we think about marketing a little bit more, we need also to be careful going forward how we approach platforms on social media, how we can avoid things like violent extremism, hate speech, graphic violence, harassment, bullying, medical misinformation. All of those kind of things are the risks our customers at the moment and why they are still concerned of going this way. We don't know the boundaries yet, so we need to be careful here. Yeah.
You've mentioned regulation. How do you see regulation? You're in the European Union. I'm in the United States of America. Who do you see establishing regulation for this, for these kind of breaches or for the concerns you're mentioning?
Yeah, mainly in the EU. Everything comes from the European Commission, and it's still, if you think about Metaverse, and it's all about data, and it's about AI, it's about those kind of regulations that come up. We have the EIT, the European Institute of Innovation and Technologies, that is looking into the Metaverse, strongly working together with the European Commission, and they are setting up their first regulations basically now in December, but they are linked to how we deal with artificial intelligence, responsible AI. So it really comes down to ethics, who's accountable for things, how can we really make sure data privacy is owned by the person. Once you enter a metaverse just right now, and we call it, by the way, dataverse as well, but it's more how you identify yourself, how you make sure it's really the person that's in it, or it's just a different identifier. What I said before, and I think you said it at day one, there was someone speaking about that it's about voice recognition. So that might be an typically identifier for a person itself rather than just a code. Right now, we don't have laws for this, so we have recommendations, and we are working on that. How is it in the US?
Non-existent as far as I know. In fact, I think Elon Musk has just disassembled one of his regulatory panels on the Twitterverse. One moment, Dr. Harpy had a hand up out in the audience. Sir, do you have a question? Or ma'am?
Yes, I was wondering if anyone knew what was recommended for patients or people who feel nauseous when they get into the metaverse. Some of these people want to continue, but they want to know how they can get used to wearing the headset. I actually know somebody who said they went to VR chat and they felt better coming back to alt space after they'd been in VR chat and their symptoms were improved. So I'm wondering if anyone has looked at ways to help improve people's feelings of nauseousness and just motion sickness in VR.
That's a great question. The question is about nausea, and are there things that the patients or the participants can do about nausea? Dr. Albusadi, have you been doing things for your patients?
Yes, actually, what you are doing is trying controlling the effect of nausea inside the VR experience itself. Now, sometimes when you design the VR experience, the speed and the way of the movement, it may cause feeling of nausea or dizziness. It is like when for like when you are taking a boat in the sea, for example, you may feel the same feeling because the movement is unusual for your eyes. So we are working on trying to make the movement is very smooth, not cause the dizziness or nausea. But sometimes, maybe even sometimes people will feel nausea. So we didn't work exactly with reducing the effect of VR if they are getting nausea, even if we did the control of the smoothness of the content. We prefer them to remove the headset and then maybe try it again later, because some people maybe they are not used to use VR, so maybe the first time they may feel that and next time they may feel better. But the most effort we are doing is in the design of the VR experience itself, the visuals, also the colors. And because we are working with psychology specialists, so we work on the story of the content, the VR experience, the colors, the size of the objects, and the visual elements, even the audio elements and the story itself. So we are trying to reduce the bad psychology effect on the person, and also the dizziness feeling by also as a result the nausea.
If I can add on, I think some of the earlier technology, they found out that if people couldn't see their nose in virtual reality, they would get sick. So with Google Glass, that was one of the things they found. And if they put in the image of a nose kind of in the middle, it somehow helped the eyes and the kind of the brain know where things were, and it seemed to help with nausea. In terms of medicinal things, there are non-medicinal things you could do, like eating ginger, chewing mint gum, those kinds of non-medicinal over-the-counter things to help. But I think, and Dr. Albusadi already kind of mentioned it, I think if the person's too sick, like if it's a patient and we're worried about them being compromised, they can just take the headset off, at least for now. Dr. Harvey, did that answer your question?
Yes, that was very helpful. Thank you very much.
And
Any
maybe
other
just to
questions?
add on this, I think it's also it's really a step-by-step process, right? It's not really said that we all need to jump in a virtual reality having VR glasses. I mean, we at Microsoft, we kind of have also understood that this is a big challenge. So we use basically data mesh. So it's really our so-called gateway to Metaverse. And it's basically just our laptop or smartphone. So we don't need at the beginning clunky headsets or expensive tech to basically enter it. And with this approach, it's more or less focus on available capabilities that we have right now in companies, but also personally, private, at home, and then step by step enter the process. It will be, again, the journey we are on. And I'm not even having a HoloLens at home because it's very costly, to be honest. Yeah.
There's a question in the audience from Joey.
Hello. Oh, hello. I can see this is all sponsored by the NHS, AstraZeneca, and all of that kind of stuff. Is there a specific example you can give where VR or XR has been applied and it's actually helped in a medical way?
Dr. Albusadi, you referenced some of the literature. There are studies, at least in emergency literature, where if there's a child who's going to undergo a painful procedure, like for instance, a laceration repair, so they cut themselves on a toy or something like that, instead of having either the parents hold them or instead of giving them a medicine to calm them down, putting the goggles on, having them play a game or having them see a calming thing has allowed the repair to proceed without any of these medications, which have also side effects and costs associated with them. So that's kind of one example. Is that what you're does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be far and wide that it's being sponsored by all of these different partners. I was just wondering if there were more. I would have thought there'd be a whole world of kind of like opportunities. I'm just wondering. I'm trying to work out. I'm a third year nursing student, and I'm just wondering how this could be applied to education or medicine at all. I mean, that one example is great. I'm just wondering what are all the other applications.
Dr. Albusadi or Dr. Klebôn, do you want to talk about some of the other applications that maybe could help a third-year nursing student who sounds like is very interested in this?
I have participated in a research study that we did in the Royal Hospital here in Oman, and we did it in the oncology center. The study was for the kids, and they have two groups, control group and mobile VR group, and the results was very positive. They found a reduction in the anxiety, reduction in the pain level. By the way, the most of this study has been done by the nurses in the hospital by itself, and they have also measured the number of nurses used, and there is a huge difference between the VR and traditional way. And myself, we have a company developing therapeutic VR experiences for the hospitals, and now we are working with that hospital in developing VR experiences for their patients, especially customized for them. We have also now another study to be done by nursing students also in Sultan Qaboos University, that they will be also using our solution to see the effect on the pediatric patients. So there are studies that are already published, and based on my experience, the results, there is there is an impact of using VR for the patients. But I think the secret is where to use it. I think it is not always successful in all cases. You need to know where to use it.
Joey, the NHS panel will be up next. Sorry, what were you going to say?
So the main areas that you've looked at so far is kind of like more for distraction, to abate kind of anxiety and stuff like that. That's the main area you've seen that it can be useful. That's its main application at the moment. But obviously there's research ongoing into other areas.
Sure. So Dr. Albusadi is clinical. I'm educational, and I use it for my nursing students to have them run an ACLS mega code. So I'll have them put on the headset. I use some proprietary software from a company called Health Scholars. They don't give me money to say this, but that's the company I use. And so the nurse puts on the headset. There's 6 people saying the patient's coding, what do we do? And then the nurse has to verbalize the correct algorithm for a code resuscitation. So education is another place for it. Maybe this is a good time to talk about the horrible or the what is it, the bad, the ugly. There are case reports about nursing students who have been given a VR experience of what it's like to be mentally ill, like schizophrenic. We think of schizophrenics as kind of benign homeless people, but they often have very intrusive, very derogatory, and constant self-harming verbal hallucinations that only they can hear. And so by putting on this headset, it looks like a normal world, but then there's a satanic voice saying horrible things. And some nursing students who had prior psychiatric illnesses actually had relapses after this kind of education. So that's a rare event, but that would be one of the horrible stories. So I'm involved in education. Dr. Albusadi is doing more clinical, and it sounds like Dr. Klebôn is doing a little bit more of the research. But I think we do need, the students of tomorrow hearing about this and maybe seeing areas where we could apply it or noticing harms that we just didn't anticipate. Ross had his question up, and then he put it down. And if not, then Dr. Metaverse is next for questions. Dr. Metaverse, you still have a question?
Hey, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
All right, perfect. So, real quickly, I just wanted to say that I agreed with the comment made earlier about options for people to access the metaverse, because the headsets are really expensive, and that can be a huge barrier for people really being able to engage in these virtual world experiences. I found that there is a lot of fear out there. People don't really understand what the metaverse is when you say it, and there's a lot more education that really needs to be done to increase people's willingness even to try it out. So that's a couple things. The question I had in terms of the vertigo, has there been any studies in terms of use of scopolamine patches in helping with these symptoms of vertigo when you're wearing the headset?
Not to my knowledge. Dr. Albusadi, are you familiar with any? I think. Sorry, go ahead, Dr. Albusadi.
I said not to my knowledge also.
Yeah, my inclination is not to prophylax with a medication if I don't know if the patient's going to have a reaction. I generally wait for symptoms to onset before I would actually apply a medicine. That being said, somebody who is prone to road sickness or seasickness, they may tell me that that they have a lot of problems with vertigo, and that's the kind of patient I might entertain that idea for. But I don't know if we would have the numbers to do a good clinical trial for the prophylactic use of scopolamine. Would be my response to that. And no, I don't know of any studies that were done already. Dr. Klebôn, could you talk a little bit about the economic or the access to this software or to this hardware? I think is more Dr. Metaverse's concern. Do you have any thoughts about that, or have visions, both good, bad, and ugly, about how that might occur?
We spoke already about costs. I think it's again, if you think about blockchain technology, it never works when it was private. It only works when it's public. And I'm not speaking about the crypto, right? I'm speaking about the DLT technology beyond that. I think it's really having that access. It's more easy for, let's say, the younger ones that play games. But then if you go and look in the bad, then there is a huge risk for addictive behavior. And in the business area, right now, we are really literally exploring. So we have a lot in manufacturing space. You see a lot in the pharma space. But then it's like really getting access, being open to this and having that equipment costs right now. Most companies are not ready to invest it in. For me, coming back to the bad, if I'm not sure how to identify a person, because right now we are all in here because we have an account, right? But this is very easy hackable. So in the future, we need to think about maybe we put it on a blockchain because it's unhackable. Maybe we think about we identify ourselves with kind of hash code, but also maybe our voice. Because this way we might be able to avoid potential bullying, harassments, assaults, or all such kind of things that are piece of, for me, the unknown, what will happen in the future, like it happened on social media.
I think those are great points. Yeah, the economics definitely has a good and bad and ugly aspect to it. So thank you, Dr. Metaverse, for bringing that up and kind of highlighting that. Did your question get answered?
Yes. The only thing I wanted to add to the question of, I think, the nursing student, in terms of other uses, current, one of the biggest things I see in terms of these virtual world experiences is community building. And one of the ways that I'm using the virtual world is to help combat burnout amongst healthcare professionals. So that's another use of it.
I love hearing that, Joey. So it sounds like there might be resources for community building, maybe with nursing students from other countries or something like that. And I could see a good being helping with burnout and kind of for people sharing experiences, and maybe the bad might be the siloing or the extremist groups like Dr. Klebôn was mentioning. There was one more question, I think, from Sandra, and then we're going to be wrapping up here pretty soon, and the NHS panel will be next. Sandra, are you still in the audience?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Your voice is a little bit quiet, or maybe I'm old. Can you speak up a little bit?
I'll try to speak up a little more. Is that better?
That's great. Thank you so much.
I had a question for Dr. Albusadi. I was just interested in your comment that you were getting resistance from nursing staff when you were using VR as in clinical cases. And I wondered what sort of strategies you were using to overcome that.
Thank you for the question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Actually, I found that in healthcare, for example, when you want to access the hospitals or the clinics, we need to make sure that the nurses are accepting the technology. One thing is if they are feeling that they are forced to do a change, and this is not only for nurses, but I found that in the healthcare system, the nurses effect is very strong. So I found that if they are the one who is looking, they are facing a huge problem in their field, and they are themselves looking for a solution to reduce the pressure or maybe the problems of the patients, they will be accepting the solution. For example, in our case, because we are working on the therapeutic part of the patients, so we found for the hospitals who accepted using the VR headsets that the nurses themselves, they started to search for a solution to reduce the anxiety from their patients. And it was easier for us to convince them to use it because they have already the the will to use it. And other side, when we try to use it in other clinics, that nurses maybe they are not the first person who required such technology, or maybe they don't know about this technology. It was not easy to convince them. I tried myself to sit and to understand how do they think and what are their top priorities. So I think the solution is to let them use it for the longest time for them until they feel they used to use the VR headset, and they know that tricks how they can work with it. They need not to feel that it is taking time from them, and also they don't need to feel that it is an extra work for them. If they will not feel that they are getting these 2 points, I think it will be easier on them to accept it. This is for nurses and non-nurses, but I found it with nurses the most.
Were you working with individuals, or were you using group orientation to introduce the technology to staff?
Actually, I work with the group at the beginning, but not big groups, even maybe 4 or 5 people.
Dr.
And,
Albusadi, I'm so
we
sorry
told
to
them
interrupt. Sandra, it's a great question. We may have to finish up this discussion offline. NHS is going to be starting in just 1 minute here.
Thank you, Dr. Albusadi.
The barriers by technology, not just for our patients, but for our staff are definitely something we're going to have to surmount. I think that there is a lot of good. I think there's also a lot of bad, and there's definitely some potential ugly out there. And I appreciate our panelists. Thank you, Dr. Albusadi, Dr. Klebôn, for their insight. And thank you for the audience for kind of participating and asking those thought-provoking questions. Much appreciated. And I think follow up with these discussions offline.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Right. Let's give a big thank you to our panel for discussing this range of topics, and we'll take a 5-minute break to set up for the next speakers. And thank you to each of you and Dr. Wexner for very rapidly coming on and taking the stage. Much appreciated. Congrats, everyone. We'll take a quick break.